And then everybody went, but I remember, and then Patricia and you guys climbed back into the breach again on the other story. But it just tells you, I mean, you're going to take the heat if you're right. And I think I look back on one of the most amazing parts of the luck that I've had in being able to do radio was the Ramsey case. Mm-hmm. And I said early on, I said, there's no way that this intruder came into that house, and how crazy it all was. And there seemed to be, and I think one of the things that kept that story alive seemed to be endless video of this little girl. I'll use the word sexified. I'm sure it's not even a word, but they almost make her look like a showgirl, and she's just a little kid. She's 6.
And that was, among the first times that kind of subculture, got such a wide viewing across the country. And now, of course, it's a reality TV staple, and we're very familiar with the whole phenomenon. But, back then, especially when linked to such a tragic story, it was startling to a lot of folks.
Caplis and I have discussed this at great length. Who continued to supply performance tapes of that little girl? And I personally believe it was Patsy. I don't know that. But it was like daily there was another bizarre performance video that appeared on television. And then in a very short amount of time, it leaped off of local TV and it became national TV.
And that's one of the fascinating things about, what's happened in the last few days here with Mark Beckner and his Reddit conversation is, that this fascination with this story, which, is almost 20 years old now, just continues. It doesn't show any sign of ebbing, and there are a lot of people still out there for whom this is current news. It's not anything in the distant past.
If you just joined us, the one and only Mike Roberts from Westward, and Alan Pendergast is going to join us here in about 25 minutes. We're talking about, and if you're a Ramsey geek, you know this happened. If you're not, I don't know if anybody locally picked up the story other than Westward, but Mark Beckner, who, by the way, he replaced Tom Kobe. Kobe was the original chief on the job, who was a disaster. He was arrogant. He was ridiculous. He attacked the press. He was anything and everything but a good chief. And Beckner replaced him. And Beckner, I think, I met him once. I think he's a very good man. And that's just my take. But he walks into this internet interview, which speaks volumes to the things that you've written about, why the internet is so important.
Well, and not only that, but Reddit is something that is not exactly an unknown quantity at this point. The publication here locally that's done a lot on this is the Boulder Daily Camera, with whom Beckner spoke. Yep. But in terms of Beckner's explanation about doing this Q&A, it's called an Ask Me Anything. He seemed to be under the impression that this was almost a private conversation, and that's extraordinarily naive and kind of comically so. Mm-hmm. It's hard to imagine that he thought he could discuss this case online on a major forum and it just be between the people who he was talking to directly, and yet we kind of owe Mark Beckner a debt of gratitude for that naivete, because he spoke more frankly and more openly about this case than pretty much anybody has in recent memory who was in a position of power, who was in an official investigatory position in this case. And he has some very interesting things to say.
By the way, have you heard that Paula Woodward was writing this book, or it actually had written a book, exonerating John Ramsey and Patsy Ramsey, and it was all good to go, may have even been published. And the way that I know this, Carol McKinley told me this story that Paula had, and also former Governor Owens had called me. And suffice to say, Paula never called me, but she was going to go, and Owens believed that he was going to be in the crosshairs of the book. And Carol, of course, did a lot of work on the story as well. But we were told the book was even entitled from the what I was told, and I don't know this, that it was the first line of that so-called ransom note. And that was going to be the title of the book. And she had it all good to go, and then God bless Charlie Brennan. Charlie Brennan, and you're right, the Daily Camera, he gets people from inside that grand jury to say, we wanted to indict John and Patsy. And at that point, Woodward's book vanishes. John Ramsey's resolved that he's an innocent bystander. All these things simply go away. Do you know anything at all about that, Mike?
I have heard many stories about this. I have not independently confirmed them with the sources, so I'm not comfortable going into detail.
Yeah.
But the account that you just gave jives with things that I have heard.
Yeah, I've heard them too, and I did talk with Bill Owens. He did call me to tell me that Paula was working on a book, and he thought that he was going to be the target of the book. And I know Carol called me as well. Carol McKinley called me and told me the same thing. Those are my two sources, that the book was, and I heard the book was done. It was at the printer, and I don't know if that's any of that's true, but and it with the title of the book was, Listen Closely, whatever that was, that nonsense that Patsy wrote, and all of a sudden, boom, it vanishes. And John Ramsey has indeed gone to the mattresses as well. And we're going to talk with Pendergast when he gets here, but what's the lesson here in the media, in the internet, and the story itself?
Well, one of the lessons, and there are many in this case, is that the internet is forever. None of this stuff goes away. It's out there. It continues to circulate. It continues to grow and mutate and develop in ways that none of us could have envisioned back on that terrible day in 1996. At this point, it's unfortunate that it hasn't evolved in such a way that this case has been definitively solved, and that there are people who have been held responsible for this. But in general, the fascination for this case is keeping it alive, and those images that you talked about beforehand that are so indelible and so iconic at this point are going to keep it alive. I don't see this fading away anytime soon.
No.
And maybe decades from now we'll look back on it and go, "Do you remember?"
Sure.
In that kind of a way. But right now this feels very fresh and very current. The explosion of interest in Mark Beckner's comments are only more proof of that.
I agree. This story was so much a part of me, and because we all were getting roughed up and threatened to be sued, and doing a lot of TV, and we would get these threatening messages. I'm going to sue you, and I remember Caplis and I talking about it many, many times, and Dan would just say they're not going to sue, but the people that showed up in this, and I ended up in Jefferson County Court twice. And, of course, Fleet White did time. They put Fleet White in jail. The only person ever went to jail in the Ramsey case, well, actually, I think that J.T. Colfax went to jail.
That was going to be the other name that I was going to mention.
Yeah.
He's the only other one that I know of.
And Fleet went. And they were after that guy from the tabloids. And I have a private story about that was amazing. But they knew that note and I had seen the note. I was taken and shown the note, and then they found out, and they were offering me, they offered my ex-wife a big diamond ring, and I went, first of all, I don't have the note. Second of all, I wouldn't do that. And remember, they went up to Evergreen, and they went to that guy's house and offered him cash, and then we all ended up in Jefferson County in court.
Wow.
And
well, some of the Beckner remarks, during this Reddit conversation, they were just so simply put that it was a way of sort of understanding some of the things that went on that you hadn't really considered before, or maybe hadn't thought about for a while. And one of them was, this happened right around Christmas time.
Next day.
Everybody was on vacation, and so the Boulder Police Department was incredibly short-staffed at a time that it was absolutely key to have all hands on deck. And that's something that I'm sure has been talked about here and there, but he really pinned that down in a way that rang true to me.
Oh, sure. I mean, the two young cops that came to the house when the note said, "Don't notify the police or she's dead. We're watching the house." That's a dead giveaway right there. She calls the cops. But the other part we're going to talk to Alan about it is that 911 phone call, and this will be in the next segment. But there was a 911 phone call. Patsy calls 911 when told not to, and she doesn't hang the phone up. She thinks the phone is hung up. And I was always told, I've never heard the call, but I was always told you could hear voices, people talking, and what was said. And to Beckner, in this interview, and I printed it the next day, and I got it in my Ramsey file, when he says he believes you can hear Patsy saying, "Help me, Jesus, help me, Jesus," and he believes you can hear Burke Ramsey's voice and John Ramsey's voice. And we'll talk with Alan about that. Great work, man. I know that you took on that new website, and then just as an aside, I know that's a hard thing to do, and you really came through it well, Mike. You did a great job with that, brother. So then thank you for covering this, and we're going to go to Pendergast and talk with him.
Well, he's the man. He has done some of the best reporting on this case for a long, long time. So you've got a great source there.
He's my guy. Anything you'd like to leave us with? Anything you want to add? And by the way, it's Westward is the website, westward.com. It's easy.
Westward.com, yeah. We're just under the news banner now. All of the names that we had used previously for our blogs, the news was known as the latest word, and we're still using that name in print. But when you come to our website, we're just news now.
Thanks. Have a great weekend, Michael. Thank you very much for doing the show.
Not at all. Thank you.
Mike Roberts, we're coming back with the man, Alan Pendergast. I'm going to talk about that 911 call because that was so bizarre. It was always talked about. Without further ado, I am such a fan. Please say good morning. And we spend probably more time together than we should. I'm an enormous fan of his work. This is Alan Pendergast. Moments ago, we spoke with Mike Roberts on Mark Beckner's comments and how the media, again, takes on things. And, of course, Alan, everyone should know Alan, an investigative reporter. I think he is the man on so many stories, Columbine, certainly the Ramseys and others. We were together with Fleet and Priscilla White. We talked about their role in all of this. First of all, hey, brother, thanks for doing this. Good morning and welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Peter.
Is that a pretty good quick? Just a quick overview of bio so people that may never have heard you before get a sense.
Well, I've been staff writer at Westward for a couple of decades. I've also done magazine work. I took 6 months to work with 60 Minutes on Columbine, which, as you know, yielded a bunch of stories also for Westward, mostly about the police response that day and the things they were not coming forward with about what they knew about these 2 kids before that happened. And I teach down at Colorado College, a little bit of journalism, and over the years, the Ramsey case keeps coming up like a bad penny. I mean, it's just no way around it.
Why does it stay in the news?
Well, I think, first of all, because it is unsolved. I mean, it's a classic mystery, and it has the sort of trappings that attracted a lot of attention from the beginning, starting with these child beauty pageants and these bizarre parents and the police and the prosecutors having this very public feud. I think there were a lot of reasons that it kind of caught public imagination. And then, there's also this whole sense that it became a window into Boulder and the sort of power structure and the politics of the place because of the way this case was handled, or as even Mark Beckner will acknowledge, mishandled from the beginning.
Also, it was a media feud. The Rocky Mountain News that we dubbed the Ramsey Mountain News Lisa Levitt Reichman and others, they did total laydowns for the Ramseys.
Well, I think there was a general, there was a general understanding once this story broke that you had to sort of pick sides because you were going to be trying to get access, and you were looking for ways to get stories other people didn't have. So, yeah, there were a lot of strange deals made.
Paula Woodward, we just mentioned Paula.
Deal where the Ramseys had the select group of reporters come to the secret location with the secret handshake and password.
That's true.
That kind of thing. And you had people who were working the DA's office, and the DA, of course, thought he was working with them. I mean, he was having some of these tabloid guys come into his office.
Jeff Shapiro, remember that?
Yeah. Alex Hunter would sit down with people from the Globe and try to elicit information that might be useful to him. This was very bizarre. So, there was a lot of national media attention, which also sort of stirred things up. I mean, Vanity Fair was in town. You had some experiences with her, and
I loved her.
And there were national, people like Jane Pauley showing up through the whites.
Geraldo Rivera.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, they were all here.
It corresponded with a couple of things. One was this, whole tabloidization of TV news with all these cable shows that were starting to show up, including Geraldo. The other thing, though, was the rise of the Internet and the subculture. I mean, O.J. was a little too early for the Internet because most people were still watching that on TV. By the time the Ramsey case really took off in, '97, you had all these people out there with America Online accounts, those little discs you used to get in the mail, the dial-up service, and chat rooms and special bulletin boards coming out devoted to this case. It really became an online community.
It was amazing.
Trying to figure out this murder.
What a time.
It was a bizarre thing, but I mean, it's a piece of Americana that I think people will be dissecting for years to come.
I do too. And then there were the arch villains, people like Michael Tracy and Mary Lacey, and I think there were some lawyers that I've always...
the one thing you and Mike didn't talk about, among Beckner's comments were some really interesting comments about Mary Lacey. At least it was in the Daily Camera piece.
I have it in front of me.
Obviously all this stuff is gone from Reddit. It was taken down within hours.
Yeah.
But I thought that was the most candid concession ever from the police that, look, we knew this guy, John Mark Carr. Within hours, we could figure out this was not the guy. So why was Mary Lacey so keen on bringing him back, into it?
But if I could pause you, the reason I'm bringing any of that stuff up with Michael is I was waiting to do it with you because that was something we spent a lot of time on. Yeah. But John Mark Carr, he was groomed. He was just like a pedophile grooms a kid. Michael Tracy, who keeps his job at CU, which is beyond me, I mean, he is really one of the most underhanded. The descriptive narrative of Michael Tracy is the worst. And Michael Tracy grooms the sad case John Mark Carr. And they send an airplane to get him. He's drinking champagne, eating caviar. This is Mary Lacey. And by the way, what's really interesting, if you ever look at that picture, some of the people standing in that picture were later the people who attempted to destroy the life of Corey Voorhees, the ICE agent. There were ICE people in that picture. Alan, I don't know if you ever knew that or not.
No, I know that Homeland Security surfaced in the Carr thing in a weird way too. And I just there was a lot of strange connections in that case.
But it was principally Michael Tracy.
Yeah, I mean Tracy was a journalism professor who was making these pro-Ramsey documentaries, serving up one alternate suspect after another. He's contacted by Carr under a pseudonym by email, and they have this conversation that goes on by email and phone for months and months and months.
How many? I think 11 months. What's the real number? What's the?
Oh, I don't have the chronology for me, but it went on for more than a year.
Okay.
And the tapes that came out of this and the emails that come out of this make it very clear that in some ways Tracy was supplying information to Carr to make his story more plausible.
He was grooming him.
And, you have to say, what's the point of this? Of course, he saw, if he really believed this guy did it, then I suppose he thought there was a big documentary rainbow. It helped to further mess up the investigation.
Well,
it didn't help Boulder's image any.
Michael Tracy was in bed, not figuratively, but literally with the Ramseys, with their lawyers, And, of course, after the DA's job gets switched out, and there's all kinds of weirdness about Mary Lacey or Mary Keenan and her role in what was taking place, breaking into the so-called war room, the fish wrap stories. I mean, there's nobody. I mean, this is like, it's Byzantine. There are plots within plots. There's boxes within boxes.
Well, and this is what makes Beckner's comments so interesting. I mean, he says, my gut reaction was that Mary Lacey did not know the facts of the case.
Yes, she did. And I disagree with that one statement. I love she knew everything. She was involved in it. She was an aide to Alex Hunter. I believe she had broken into the war room for whatever reasons.
Certainly, I mean, her bias was pretty evident.
And why?
Before she became DA, she was telling, in Steve Thomas's book, in Texas book, he talks about her coming up to him, explaining to him that the Ramsey's body language was not indicative of deception.
Stupid.
And that he has no business trying to judge the credibility of Patsy Ramsey.
Indeed, but again, why? You ask yourself why this woman would have done what she did. And I don't understand Lisa Levitt Reichman. I don't understand Paula Woodward. Michael Tracy. I just think he's just underhanded. But for Paula, maybe it was the money. I don't know what she thought. Lisa Levitt Reichman, I have no idea what she was thinking. All of these people sort of vanished into the woodwork. And I asked Roberts if he knew about that Paula book that was allegedly coming until, as I say, God love Charlie Brennan, he drops the truth. They were going to grab John and Patsy. They were going to indict them. And suddenly this blockbuster book from Paula Woodward just sort of vanishes into the woodwork as well.
Well, I think people who allied themselves with the Ramseys at some point, it's an awkward situation when you find out that a grand jury that heard what was the available evidence thought that they could at least be indicted for, as some kind of accomplices in this thing. It's over the years that case the case has gotten incredibly muddled, but I think there are still things that you can go back and say, wait a minute, this is odd behavior. These are statements that don't make sense. These are inconsistent statements. There's a lot of things that suggest something happened with people inside the house.
Of course.
And this evidence of the intruder keeps, falling away.
Of course.
Other thing Beckner talks about is, we ask him about it, is there a stun gun? He says, no, there was no stun gun.
No, of course not.
And that was something that was perpetrated by Lou Smith.
Absolutely.
Who was an investigator hired by the DA.
He's a sad guy. He's a sad guy.
And he was the one that gave Tracy's theories some credibility. I mean, if you're going to have an intruder, you need to have a detective.
Yeah, but if you're
how there could be an intruder.
But if you're
a lot of what Smith said turned out not to be true.
None of it. When you come in and you start
in this investigation never thought there was an intruder. There was no evidence. No evidence of an entry.
No.
What you've got is some phantom DNA, which you've got to maybe account for if you were ever actually going to make a case. But there's lots of ways that DNA could have been there.
Sure. When you're in the side yard on your knees praying with the Ramseys to Jesus, I'm sorry, you no longer qualify as an impartial investigator. Here's a part that's Lou Schmidt. Here's what happens. So we always talked about the 9/11 phone call, and that morning, Patsy calls 911. When the note tells her, we're watching the house, if we so much as see a cop, she's dead. First thing Patsy does is call 911. Right away it tells you, she wrote the note. She knows there's nobody watching the house. She knows that baby's in that house dead. So she calls 911, but she doesn't hang up. And
right, there's a few seconds there, and this was later enhanced by the detectives. They went to a private, it was like an aerospace engineering firm or something, and they were able to pick up some material. Now, we were sort of relying on Thomas's book and a few other things for this, because the tape that has released, no one has ever been able to really get the same kind of enhancement. But yes, supposedly at the end there, she's saying, "Help me, Jesus! Help me, Jesus!" You can hear Burke Ramsey. There's a child's voice saying, "Well, what else? What did you find?"
Yeah. And
then you hear a very angry John Ramsey saying, "Nobody's speaking to you."
All right. Now, what's important to stop here is, and Beckner does one of those things. He said he believes that's what they were saying, and this was a really important moment for me in reading Beckner's piece. And again, I captured it and kept it and printed it. It's going to go into the vault. But Beckner says, I can tell you that I hear those sounds, those voices, or saying those words. Again, it's important. It's Patsy screaming. First of all, you apparently hear John say, "We're not speaking to you," and then Patsy's going, "Help me, Jesus, help me, Jesus." And we believe it's Burke. He said, "What did you find?" And they send the kid back to bed. Now, jump ahead in time. John tells people to go upstairs and wake up Burke.
Yes.
Now, he's already been awake. So they go up to the room, and he is, again, feigning sleep. They get him up, get him dressed. They bring him downstairs. Now, here's the house, full of cops. Roll Holverstock is there. The Whites are there. The Fernies are there. Mommy's on the couch. Everything. His sister's not there. The place is loaded with cops. Does he say anything? No. No. And he's taken out of the house. He doesn't say, where's my sister? Why is Mommy crying? I'm told this from people. I don't know this to be true, but I'm pretty sure it's true. He doesn't say, why is Mommy crying? Where's JonBenet? Why are the cops here? Why is Father Holverstock here? Why are Fleet and Priscilla here? He doesn't do any of that. Why?
Well, and in fact, I mean, I think your version is pretty correct. I've talked to Fleet. You've talked to Fleet. He's the one that drove Burke over to the White House.
That's right.
And can tell you how he was behaving. But the most crucial thing here is, well, for whatever reason, this tape undermines what the Ramseys were saying about the sequence of events that morning. I mean, if Burke was up and around and they were telling the police something false from the beginning, why are they doing that?
Thank you.
I mean, we can speculate endlessly about this, but it's just one of many pieces of information where the Ramsey's account doesn't square with other evidence.
I mean, it doesn't square at all. I mean, the break point is one thing after another, but what they do, and I'm close to a pause, how soon before they have a lawyer?
Oh, well, that day they have a lawyer.
That's right.
I mean, it's pretty clear. Mike Bynum is there, and then he's putting them in touch with people, and before the end of that day, Fleet White is being contacted by the Ramsey's attorney.
Sure. Yeah. And also, who's the big cheese lawyer in this in Denver, Colorado?
You mean in the Ramsey case?
Yeah.
Or?
Who was the over?
Well, it's Hal Haddon and
all right.
his firm, Brian Morgan.
Right. Yeah, and then we discovered that Hal apparently defended Paula's husband in an SNL case, her ex-husband. I believe that there was a link between Hal and Paula. I believe that, and I believe a lot of information that Paula used to spin stories came out of that office.
Well, there were certainly people spinning from all directions on this case.
Well,
I mean, there were a lot of agendas.
But no one was chasing. I mean, there were people. There were officers. Their job was to block investigations. I mean, Paula Woodward should be damned for what she did through this, and the same is true with a lot of other people.
Well, the real mystery, and this gets back to some of the things that Beckner was saying. The real mystery is what was going on between the DA and the police.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Hang on a second. One of my true favorites, Alan Pendergast, is with us. The former chief in Boulder, Mark Beckner, comes out and does this interview, and there's so much great info, and now they've taken this down, but we've captured it. Again, everyone, 10 minutes before the hour, and it is a pleasure as always. Alan Pendergast from Westward. We had Mike Roberts on. Mark Beckner, who was the one-time top cop in Boulder, comes out and speaks, and he thinks, I don't know, what do you think he was thinking? Did he think nobody was going to read this, or what are your thoughts?
It's hard to know. I'm not sure he totally understood Reddit. I agree with Michael on that. He seemed to think it was some sort of closed conversation or just some kind of specialized group. And, Reddit calls itself the front page of the Internet. I mean, it's widely read, and the information there goes all over the place. So, I'm not sure what happened, but I guess he thought better of it after he did it and then deleted all his comments.
Sure.
But fortunately, it was up for a little while, and various people did pay attention.
I certainly did. I talked about the 9/11 phone call. What were some of the things that you saw in this interview that you went, wow, or you said, oh, that confirms this?
Well, there were a couple things. One was, I think it's stuff we already knew, but maybe we didn't have directly from someone in as much authority as Beckner, or at least as much authority as he was when this case was unfolding. One was this sort of dismissal about the stun gun, which, he doesn't totally rule out the intruder. He says, yeah, we got this unexplained DNA, and until we explain it, you're not going to be able to bring a very successful case. Any lawyer would drive a truck through that. But it tells from the beginning there was this split between the people, primarily the police, who did not see any real evidence of an intruder. The note is done on Patsy's pad. The handwriting is similar to hers. There are very few implements of this crime that weren't actually, from the scene, the paintbrush, everything else. Smith comes along with this stun gun and this idea of an intruder slipping through that basement window and makes a big deal out of that, but the police never bought it, and that's one thing that comes out in those comments. So the other is clearly his sense that this whole Mark Carr fiasco was something that could have been avoided if anybody had looked, if anybody who knew the case was seriously going to look at his confession and say, this doesn't make sense. They could have found out within a few hours he wasn't in Boulder at the time. This went on for months and months and months under Lacey's control.
But remember,
became this sideshow.
Yeah, remember the first media outlet to break the John Mark Carr story, Channel 9.
Yeah.
And that was fed.
It was a triumph, however brief, for the intruder theory people.
And it wasn't.
Michael Tracy saw big. He was going to make a big documentary about this. And then it all fell apart.
The guy's in Bangkok having breast implants.
Yep.
And Channel 9 trumpets it, and I tell you how that went down. I don't know this, but it went from Michael Tracy, who like a pedophile grooms this twisted little creature for a year or 11 months. He hands it to Mary Lacey. She screams, Eureka. One of the two of them, or both of them, called Channel 9, and Paula Woodward breaks the story. I remember it so well. And they triumphantly said it's been solved. And it's this strange, bizarre character. And that should have ended Tracy's career at CU, and of course it did not. Mary Lacey is just, words don't describe. So what else did we...
And of course the thing that happened subsequent to that, which is very important, is Lacey then goes on to write a letter of exoneration.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about this before. This really set the stage for the rest of the media to be dismissive thereon. When it does turn out from Charlie Brennan's fine work that this indictment, the grand jury had this indictment in hand, the foreman had issued a true bill, and Hunter refused to sign it.
Indeed. But that letter...
It's easy for other media outlets who don't understand the complexity of this case to just sort of say, well, but the Ramseys were cleared years later.
No, but that's not true. But that letter...
That's sort of a misnomer in this whole thing.
Well, of course it is. But that letter put wind in the sails of Paula Woodward, and she was off to see the wizard. I often wondered if she got an advance to do that book, if she had to give it back, whatever they were doing. But Bill Owens was certain that he was the target of that book. What else in this... And it's a pretty lengthy piece. We should post it probably because I have it. I thought it was interesting in the cause of death stuff that they, and whether or not she had been sexually molested. I think that was part of staging. And in fact, Beckner thought it was part of Patsy staging the crime. Your thoughts?
Well, clearly something took place, but you have to sort of come up with a scenario that makes sense. And there's no scenario this fits into. If you're talking about standard, stranger crimes, assaults on children, talk to the FBI. This is so far out of the range of anything anybody has seen that it almost has to be a staging.
Sure.
At the standpoint that, what kidnapper would come into the house, use their pad to write their ransom note.
And do a practice
and
note.
A
practice note first, right, indeed.
Yeah. And then instead of taking the child out of the house, take the child to the basement, commit all these acts of violence.
And by the way, that basement is like a rabbit warren. If you didn't know,
and put him in a room that,
right.
that nobody would even know was there,
right.
if you didn't know the house. And then somehow
and then
slip
go
away.
Then go to Patsy Ramsey's paint box that was in another dark room and get a paintbrush to use as a fulcrum for the strangulation.
Yeah, no, the whole thing is so strange. And yes, to the extent that this assault, the sexual side of it, seems both kind of tentative and kind of pointless. It just looks like more diversion, more smoke and mirrors, something to distract what's really going on here.
Leave us with a final thought from this.
Well, I think Beckner's frustration comes through in these comments. That there was a sense from the beginning that this case was doomed. Some of it was the police's own missteps, but more so, I don't think those were. I think those were overcomable. I think the problem from the beginning was so much resistance from the DA's office, from the Ramseys, and lack of cooperation that it just raises tons of questions about the way the justice system works, particularly when you have a very well-heeled defendant or suspect.
Sure.
Who can afford to throw up these kind of roadblocks, and the way that various people, the media, the prosecutors, seem to play into their hands.
And you and I have...
to me, that's very illustrative of something that's wrong with our system.
And two people I'm sure are listening this morning, and I have immense respect for them, are Fleet and Priscilla White, and they have an inner working network of who was connected to who that is always a curveball in all of this.
Well, and they showed a lot of courage over the years.
Huge courage.
Trying to work towards a resolution of this, and
they got blamed.
Being part of the circus.
The Ramseys blamed them.
Oh, sure, yeah, no, they got thrown under the bus. A lot of people did.
They blamed everybody.
And they were also slimed by some media outlets.
Oh, totally.
There were some terrible things that happened to them and their family in the course.
Absolutely.
They as we talked about when they were on your show. I think they showed incredible integrity.
I do too.
Determination.
I do too. I have all the respect in the world for. And Fleet went to jail. There's only a couple of people who ever went to jail. I think J.T. Colfax and Fleet White.
Yeah, I think there were a couple guys involved. The ones who were pretending to be Ramsey on the phone. And get the credit card record. There were a lot of weird private investments and people they're messing with evidence.
I ended up in Jefferson County in the Taj Mahal, and also my son, because he received a subpoena. It's just crazy stuff. And I made the jokes that I was there in front of that judge so many times she called me by my first name. Oh, man. What a time. What a time.
It is astonishing that this thing went in so many different directions except the right one.
Yeah, she looked down. She said, "Good to see you again, Peter." I said, "Thanks, Your Honor." What a time. And Fleet, I tell you, Fleet and Priscilla White are some of the best, and they went through so much over this. And brother, but it's another twist and turn and closer to perhaps the truth. And again, knowledge and belief are two separate things, but there's no question in my mind who killed that little girl. Take care of yourself.
Good talking to you.
Thank you, Alan. When we come back,